Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of Rotten Reviews. Today we're going to take a look at the movie Jumper from 2008. We have a 15% tomato meter score and a 44% audience score. Now, this movie gets a lot of hate, both online and in the real world. Jumper kind of, when you say the word jumper or you reference this movie in any regard, even just down at your local corner store, when somebody gets the reference, they give you this dismissive, snide look and they say something to the effect of, yeah, I've seen that movie. And it's been going on for so long that I kind of wondered, why does it get all this hate? In my personal opinion, just starting off, I think that it has a lot to do with Hayden Christensen, not his acting in itself in this movie, but his reputation and his acting performance, particularly in the Star Wars prequels, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones being the two culprits. And I think that it has caused such a resentment in people that are not only Star Wars prequel fans, but they are fans of sci-fi and fantasy in general. And so if they are fans of the Star Wars prequels, they are very likely to be fans of this type of movie involving teleportation and superpowers in general. So here we have Jumper from 2008 that's coming in 3 years after the last Star Wars prequel movie left the theater, which would be Revenge of the Sith. And we have, I believe to this day, the hate for Hayden Christensen carried forward in time. That's my theory. Because in this particular movie, I don't think he was miscast. I think he worked perfectly for the character that he was supposed to play in this film, and I think he was supposed to come across as a little bit of a douchebag. That was part of the role, and as a result, I think in this movie he works fine. His acting is good. Now, in other films, I agree that Hayden Christensen is really bad. His acting is off-putting. Not as bad as in the prequels, but there are other films featuring Hayden Christensen that, just his presence in the movie rubs you the wrong way, and he is miscast in those movies. In this one, I think he is perfectly cast for the character he is playing, and that's what the director wanted, so I don't consider that a fair criticism, but I think a lot of this hate, a lot of the audience score is simply going to be Hayden Christensen himself. And then, of course, people that don't like him being in the movie are going to find every other flaw they can to throw in after that. But just judging this without the Hayden Christensen hate, I would give this a good 2.5 stars, because I do not find it far-fetched any more than any other comic book movie. I find this an exciting premise. I find it very interesting. I think this is a premise that could have been a 4-star, you could have made a 4-star movie from a premise like this. I just think it wasn't done right. I think in particular the ending of this movie falls flat. There could have been much more setup between the main character's mom having disappeared when he was a little kid and her role at the end, where she is discovered to be a part of the very secret organization that is hunting him and people like him with the powers. They didn't capitalize on that like they could have. They just let it fall flat and peter out at the end. I think that's the main problem with this film. But again, my point is to go through the Rotten reviews and make my case that it's just hate for Hayden Christensen overall, beyond any flaws that you could nitpick. So let's get into it. We'll go through. I'll read the rotten ones and the non-rotten ones, and we'll see what we can find. 4 stars. The movie has issues, but ultimately it's a passable exploration of a really cool concept. I don't mind the rush the movie is in to cram itself into the 90-minute format, nor the honestly lackluster action scenes, which suffer from shaky cam and quick cuts. Christensen is a good fit for the protagonist. He's just the right amount of vain, like somebody who has a power nobody else does would. Again, so little movies have the protagonists using their superpowers somewhat realistically, aka for their personal benefit. Now, I largely agree with this. The concept is really cool. Even with the flaws, it's a good exploration of it. It could have been a lot better. Again, I agree with this reviewer. It is short. It feels short. I don't know that 90 minutes is too short for any type of movie, but in this movie, it does feel like the running time is too short, and I would have liked to see another 20 minutes or so just exploring, how his mother became the one, became part of the organization that ended up hunting him. I don't think that was explored enough. It could have been a better plot twist. It wouldn't have petered out at the end like it did. I think the action scenes having shaky cam, I didn't notice that at all. I think there are there are better and worse movies that do a far worse job with the shaky cam, that show it off a lot more obviously. If it had shaky cam, it didn't pull me out of it one way or the other, nor did any quick cuts. I thought quick cuts worked really good with the aspect that we're dealing with teleportation. I mean, in a movie where you are literally a jumper, you're jumping around from point A to B, thousands of miles apart. A quick cut is exactly what you're looking for. That's what you're dealing with here, right? So any other type of transition would feel out of place to me. Again, we explore, like the reviewer says, you don't see a lot of movies exploring realistic ways that real people would use superpowers for. We see Superman, who's got this altruistic streak where he has the ability to do whatever he wants, but he just restrains himself. And you see that in almost every type of comic book character. But here you don't, and you get a more realistic portrayal of, hey, if I could just teleport around, what would I do? Especially if I wasn't already, in a career, I didn't already have clear goals in life. If you were just a high school kid that didn't know what he was going to do with his life, as this protagonist is here, this is completely realistic. Why not just pop in, rob some banks, and set yourself up really nice in a penthouse apartment? It makes perfect sense to me. So let's move on. 4 stars. This movie is epic, and the concept of what it's about is mind-blowing. The plot is awesome, and the main character is a brave hero. I disagree. The main character is a brave hero. I don't think that was the intention at all. He was supposed to be a douchebag. He was supposed to not know what the hell he wanted to do in life, and that's the way it came across, so I disagree. 3.5 stars. Jumper is thrilling and imaginative despite its pale characters. I don't think the pale characters, I don't think they were pale. I think they were underused. The other jumper that, Hayden Christensen comes across, in the desert. He's got his base when he finds out that he's not the only jumper, this other jumper character, he works really well. He seems more invigorated, more of a character you'd want to explore than the main character, and I think that was the intention of the film. Hayden Christensen is supposed to be kind of an unlikable protagonist, and he is. Special effects are not good. Script is painfully bad. I disagree on both of those. I don't think that's what brought this film down. 1.5 stars. This movie has a great concept, and the first half of this movie is exactly really fun, but the second half gets so weird, and it's all over the place and really ruins the movie. Well, I'll agree it's all over the place. They're teleporting all over the damn place from one end of the earth to the other. I thought they did a really good job of showing how you could use that in a offensive weapon type of way. I thought it was inventive. I just didn't like the way it petered out at the end. It was disappointing in a lot of ways. 3.5 stars. If you like sci-fi and fight scenes, Jumper might be in your alley. Well, yeah, it would. 5 stars. Dope effects. Cool. Good acting. Yeah, the acting was passable. I wouldn't say it was good or bad. It was passable. All the other actors did what they were supposed to do. It was believable. Again, Hayden Christensen, you can hate him for the Star Wars prequels, and his acting didn't work there at all. But remember, George Lucas was telling him exactly in detail how to play his character, so it wasn't all just Hayden Christensen in those prequels. But again, here, even if his acting is lackluster, it fits perfectly here. I mean, it just hit the mark. He comes across like the director wanted him to. 5 stars, great movie, investing idea. Would love to seen a part 2. Yeah, I could have been up for a sequel. I still think it's not too late to make a sequel, even with somebody else in the title role. Rebooting it, no, not necessary, but it would be cool to see a sequel, to see this explored. Unfortunately, I have the feeling that if we did see this explored further, it would just be a sci-fi channel quality movie. I have almost no doubt of that, unfortunately. 4 stars. I remembered this old movie just now. Seeing the critics rating, clearly the critics section of this site should be dissolved. These are just idiots paid by companies, corrupted whores. It was an action-packed, solid sci-fi movie with a lot of logic, and characters were quite solid, built, and acting based on their construct. I'll agree somewhat. No, you can't dissolve the critics because, without the critics, we wouldn't know that the audience members are right. I mean, it's the old adage, if you were living in a perfect world, then you wouldn't, it would be boring because, it's like, how would you know something is bad when everything is good? No, you need the critics to kind of bounce back against the average audience member. When the critics don't agree with the audience, that's how you can explore what might be working or failing with a film, because you have somebody being contrarian. If everybody agreed or disagreed, well, if everybody agreed, critic or not, we wouldn't have anything to talk about. If everybody disagreed, it would be, well, it wouldn't be completely a loss, but you can't just get rid of the critics. In fact, I appreciate that the critics are going to try to make themselves apart from the audience members. How can I put this? It's not like the critics are just paid off. It's like they want to elevate themselves in some way beyond a regular audience member to keep their jobs. Even if they're the most altruistic person available, they are going to fashion their critique in a way that sets them apart from just the regular Joe. And that's just, to have their ego preserved. So we need critics of some type, that aren't regular people in some way, just to have something to bounce popular opinion off of. Because a lot of times popular opinion is just crap too. Everybody seems to love Avatar. Everywhere you go, they love Avatar, and I made a video on this. If everybody in the world loves Avatar, does that make Avatar some kind of a, like pinnacle of filmmaking? No, it doesn't. I hate Avatar. I mean, I actually have a disgust of it. But, without people, that proves to me that just mass appeal doesn't mean anything. So we need outliers out there, whether they're professional critics or not, to say, hey, hold on a second, I have a contrary opinion. So while some of the critics are paid off in different ways, it's not the case. You can't lump them all into that. 2.5 stars. If I had to describe this movie in one word, it would definitely have to be convoluted. I disagree. Everything is driving towards, you have the protagonist. He discovered that he has these powers. He's taking advantage of the powers to kind of cheat the system. Then he discovers not only other people have the powers, but he's being pursued by a group of what they call themselves paladins, an organization devoted to stopping people like him. There's definitely a driving force there in the story. It's not convoluted or hard to understand, so I don't get that at all. 1.5 stars. Want the ability to teleport? Well, watch this when you want to kill time. I kind of agree with that. It kind of gives you a scenario on what would it be like if you did have that power. Would you end up in this situation? Probably, because again, if you have this power, you're probably not unique. And even if you are, eventually you're going to come up on somebody's radar, and you're not going to be able to just cheat the system forever. The world doesn't work like that. 0.5 star. Man, this David Rice was the worst character ever seen in a movie. I disagree. Again, it could be the hate for Hayden Christensen. 2 stars. This once again proves that you can have cool visuals in your movie, but you need an interesting story too. I completely disagree. It had cool visuals and it had an interesting story. Again, completely disagree on that. 1.5 stars. Horrible movie. It's just another bad Hayden Christensen movie. Almost all of his movies are bad. The plot is all over the place. The characters are poorly written. The protagonist, David Rice, is an unlikable douchebag who abuses his superpowers and uses his teleportation powers to teleport himself to bank vaults, to steal a lot of money and spend them for stuff that he wants but doesn't need, and constantly lies to his girlfriend, Millie. Millie is just a plot device character, just a damsel in distress. You're actually making the case in this review for why the movie works. Yes, he's supposed to be an unlikable douchebag. He's supposed to make stupid decisions that are obvious to the audience, that the audience would know better to make than to make in a lot of ways. That's the point. It's just that the movie kind of petered out and disappointed, and that's why you see people going back to make a case. But really, this person in his review, his 1.5 star review, is just making the case for why I enjoyed the movie. 1.5 stars. My God, was potential wasted in this movie. Now, I'll agree with that. The premise is cool sounding, some of the action is fun, and Jamie Bell steals the show as Griffin, making you wish he was the main character. I'll agree with that. Jamie Griffin's character, he was fantastic. Now, he was necessary, but so was Hayden Christensen's, character. You can't get rid of David Rice and just have the other one. It doesn't work. You need both to work off each other. Even the tie-in novel and game wish he was the main protagonist. But no, we're stuck with an unlikable protagonist. According to Doug Lyman, this actually was his intention since he wanted David to develop throughout more than one movie. Seems like it didn't work, and in the eyes of most people. So this reviewer is saying it was the director's intention that the protagonist start out as a douchebag, and then somehow in the next installments he becomes more likable. I didn't get that. I didn't get the sense that this was set up for sequels. I think this character arc that we're describing here, it could have just been pulled off in one movie, and it just wasn't, because it could have had another 20 or 30 minutes runtime, and it could have all been contained in one movie, and the character could have become a likable hero at the end. But it was, again, wasted potential. That's what I'm saying. 4 stars. This film presents good questions. What would happen if certain people had the ability to teleport anywhere in the world? What would they do? Would they use this power to hurt others or simply for themselves? It's fascinating when you think about it, and makes for a compelling villain in Samuel L. Jackson, who gets a wild gray wig hairdo in this 2007 action thriller. I know Hayden Christensen isn't the most skilled actor in Hollywood, but he was decent here for the material that was written. I'll agree with this, and in fact, yes, Samuel Jackson is our villain. He's not actually a villain in his role in the movie, but the protagonist certainly sees him as the villain. He's the guy that's out to persecute him from the protagonist's point of view in an unfair manner. But when you see the larger picture, it's not an unfair manner. And again, I think that's why the movie has wasted potential, because you're kind of sympathetic at the end to why these people, these jumpers, are being hunted. And that kind of takes a lot of the, power out of the protagonist's point of view, because, it sets it up as he's the one that's just trying to have a good time, and the villain's coming to stop him and persecute him unfairly. But yet you're giving a little bit too much sympathy towards why, these paladins would want to take him out. That's why it doesn't work. It's like the film can't make up its mind on who's doing the right thing and who's not. It kind of shows you that Hayden Christensen's character is doing, David Rice is doing the wrong things, but it makes you sympathize with him nonetheless, because it shows you that he had a shitty childhood, and a lot of that is because of the way his parents raised him or didn't raise him. So, it doesn't give you enough of an idea about who you're supposed to be considering to be morally right. It's kind of ambiguous. Again, a wasted opportunity. 3.5 stars, mainly inconsequential and obviously a franchise jumping point. See, I'm not so sure on that. I didn't get that feeling from it. It might be true, but I didn't get that feeling from it. But its kineticism and approachable characters are ample to carry the viewer to a satisfying end. Also, it's a blast to see Mace Windu get his vicarious revenge on Anakin. Okay, I'll agree with part of this that this could have gone to a satisfying end if it had a longer running time and it had been used. That extra running time had been used properly. We wouldn't have needed another movie to bring the character to the end of his arc. Could have been done in this one movie, but it wasn't. I like the dig at the end. Yes, Samuel Jackson and Hayden Christensen were together in The Phantom Menace. But again, that just brings up the fact that that hate from the Phantom Menace is seeping in, that bad reputation. 1 star. The concept behind Jumper is a pretty cool one. After discovering his ability to teleport in an incident with a school bully, David Rice uses his newfound ability to escape the life he has with his abusive father. Fast forward 8 years, and he's living a life of luxury, brought it through bank robbery and spending his day visiting several locations throughout the world. His actions catch the attention of a mysterious group called the Paladins, though, and he quickly gets dragged into a battle for survival. Now, I read that synopsis. It doesn't give me an idea of why they called this 1 star. It's a little long-winded, but I read it because it kind of counteracts some of the previous reviews I read that said this had no discernible driving plot. Obviously, it does. Somebody just stated it right there. 3.5 stars. Great film. Shame, no sequel. Only bad thing in it is Jackson playing the same character he does in all his films. That's a valid criticism. He plays a particular type of person as this, jumper hunter, this paladin. But again, he doesn't do it in a way that differentiates it enough from other roles you've seen him in. That's, character. Samuel Jackson's almost like a character actor. I know he's not considered a character actor, but he kind of is a character actor that's just had a hell of a lot of success. He's expected to say, even in a Marvel movie, people are expecting him to say, MF, the MF thing. And they even tease that in Avengers Infinity War, because this is his stick. This is what he's known for. He's basically a character actor, a very popular one. 2 stars. Concept, very cool for like 15 minutes. Then the concept gets really boring. Again, I think that's because they took it in the right direction, but they didn't capitalize enough on, why had his mother disappeared before he was born. They could have gone into that. It would have really taken this into you could have had this payoff at the end. You could have had more intrigue. It was just wasted potential. 2 stars. The opening is promising, creating an interesting idea for a movie. The rest of the movie is an underdeveloped mess with basically no payoff whatsoever. I'll kind of agree. I wouldn't say it's all wasted, but yeah, the payoff was wasted. 1.5 stars. At one point early on in this, Hayden Christensen's character is seen using his powers to move around his flat because he can't be arsed to walk. This is a metaphor for the whole film. All this power, and all he does is save himself the effort of traditional transport to go to places we can all go to and steal money to fund it. A sort of unusual thief on a permanent gap year. That's it, really. Proof that no matter how lucky you are, winning the lottery springs to mind. If you haven't got the imagination, it's wasted. Well, I think that was a point of it. That's what the director was going for. That was the story. He had all this power and he was squandering it. But again, the movie didn't work in other ways that kind of made this a little bit too strong. It made it from something that was a theme as a good jumping point, pun intended. It didn't explore things that it could have. It didn't move on from there, and so you have people in the audience left with the impression that that's all there is. That this guy was wasting our time. No, it's just we didn't explore properly in this movie. this was a fine jumping point, so to speak. It was the intention that Hayden Christensen's character was wasting his potential. 5 stars. It was a fun and great movie. Not 5 stars, but yeah, I had fun with it. Half a star. The effects are solid and the premise is cool. That's where the praise ends. With one-dimensional characters and uneven plot and lame performances, Jumper just isn't good at all. That's too harsh. 2.5 stars. Awesome idea with interesting moments, but as a whole, it just dragged and dragged. Not terrible, but not worth watching more than once. 2 stars, a good concept, terribly executed. I'll kind of agree. 5 stars, people are dumb. This movie was good. You're too easy. 2 stars, it has an exciting premise, but Jumper squanders its potential with bland characters that lack depth and uninteresting action sequences. There's nothing to see here. Half a star, unwatchable. The premise is that a jumper can go back to a place once they visited it, so you need to lose half of your life going to places in the world to then be able to go back into. The protagonist jumps to so many different places in the world that apparently there is few spots missing from his jumping places. So what they're saying is they didn't like the plot device. They're bringing this up as a plot hole, that he had too many places, or the jumpers themselves had too many places available in their collection of points to jump to, that they would have had to spend too much time visiting them first. This is not a plot hole. If you think about this, yes, your first 1 or 2 trips on transatlantic flights, your first trip across the Atlantic, your first trip across the Pacific, yes, you would have to make long visits to do this. But once you have these initial jump points, for example, you fly across the Atlantic and you visit Berlin. Okay, now when you want to visit, say, the Czech Republic, you don't have to fly across the Atlantic again. You can jump to Berlin and just spend a couple of hours on the bus to the Czech Republic. You know, after your first initial trips, long distance ones, for example, a long trip, a long flight to Australia, you only have to make that flight once, right? And then the rest is just small little trips to the points on the coasts. You get where I'm going with this. It's an exponential process, so this is not a plot hole in any regard. Within probably 1 month or less, you could have enough jump points assembled to have more than what they showed in the movie. So let's move on. 3.5 stars. Fast-moving sci-fi action movie that moves at such a pace you barely have time to really think about the plot, which is probably just as well. In fairness, there's a lot of fun to be had here, and it's nice to see Hayden Christensen in a role that's not irritating. Again, his reputation, irritating is the least, is the least unkind I've heard it called. He's just got this reputation from the Star Wars prequels that he's probably never going to be able to outlive that Star Wars prequel hate. At least not until he's old enough that he doesn't even look like, how he looked in the prequels. Maybe we're talking another 15 years. He could redo himself if he's still into acting, but he's going to be saddled with that prequel hate, I think, for a long time to come. Poor Jumper. It's better than people give it credit. 3 stars. It's a good movie to watch. 2.5 stars. This is not a movie to be mesmerized by. Rather, it's a fun way to kill an hour and a half of your time. 1 star. Jumper is a really annoying movie. The concept is good, and they have the setup for what could be a good movie, I suspect, because it's based on a book. I'm not sure on that. But then the director turns it into a typical action movie. It's not even a good action movie. The most annoying part is the ending. The main character meets his mom that left him when he was 5. He basically just says hello, they hug briefly, and he jumps off to a beach with his slutty girlfriend. Exactly the shitty ending. It's not exactly the way they're putting it here. The main character finds his mom. He visits her for the first time since she left when he was 5. She finds out that, he's on her doorstep the whole time. He finds out that she's in fact one of these paladins. It doesn't really tell you how she found out that he was, when he first revealed that he was a jumper to her, when she discovered this. You don't get into that, but you get into, it ends with her basically telling him that as a paladin, despite the fact that she's his mom, she's going to have to come after him, and that she's basically going to give him a head start, or at least make sure he has somewhat of a head start before more paladins come. but it was completely petered out disappointing because you didn't get any payoff emotionally from this because this wasn't set up. You needed another 20 or 30 minutes to weave this into the story. This could have been a terrific payoff. It could have been emotional. It could have made the whole movie something special, but it was a wasted opportunity. Um, and they used Diane Lane. That's the other thing. They had a great actress play this role as though they intended her to, be more of something. And then she was just another wasted potential. 2 stars, pretty bad. Even Samuel L. Jackson goes over the top here. Not really. Samuel L. Jackson didn't go over the top enough for this movie, in my opinion. Yes, they dyed his hair white or blonde, whichever one it was. That was superficial. He really didn't go over the top. He should have done something a little weirder, but he didn't. Um, 2 stars, good concept, bad story, mediocre acting. 2.5 stars, a great concept is ruined by villains that make no sense. Um, yeah, some of the Paladin stuff, like the way they want to capture their jumpers, they're using hardware that suggests they want to take the jumpers alive, and yet they're supposed to kill the jumpers. A lot of that doesn't make sense. If the running time was longer, maybe they could have made something more out of it. It could have been explained better. 2.5 stars, a great concept is ruined. Okay. 5 stars, used to be one of my favorite movies. It could have been, as if you were a younger kid, you're willing to overlook a lot of the problems. Um, 4 stars. Critics are full of shit this time. I really liked this movie. The action is fun. The teleportation fantasy is fun. What's not to like? Well, we've been discussing what's not to like. My first thought was that it was all Hayden Christensen hate, but no, there's other flaws in the movie. 0.5 star. A long time ago, I liked this movie because it had teleportation and that filled my imagination with lots of wonder. I just rewatched this movie recently and it is absolute garbage. Hayden has one range. Creeper Anakin. Bilson's role is non-existent. They gave her nothing to do but get stared at by Hayden and be all confused. The plot is a mess. They gave Samuel Jackson stupid hair that takes away all the coolness he demonstrates in other movies. I disagree with some of that. It's superficial. Again, of course, Creeper Anakin. They weren't going to like this no matter what because it had Hayden Christensen and they just didn't like what he did in those prequels. Okay, 2.5 stars. Really cool idea, but should have been way better. Started out great and then got out of control. I think started out great and then just kind of petered out. 0.5 star. Terrible adaptation of a fantastic book. Again, I wasn't aware that it's a book. I'll bet the book was fascinating more than the movie then. 3.5 stars. Jumper delivers the goods and great point to sci-fi action thrillers. Good, decent story that keeps interested and makes you think what I can do with that. Okay, so he's saying, it's fascinating because it explores what would you do if you had this power. Okay. 5 stars, a great movie. It's how movies are made. 5 stars, amazing movie. Made small portion of childhood great. 2 stars, while the idea seems brilliant on paper, in a movie, not so much. Also, the fact it didn't have a good story to go with it, characters you did not care about, and very bad pacing makes this movie not so great. I agree with some of that, but you're over villainizing it a little. 2.5 stars. I absolutely love the idea of Jumper as a concept and potential storyline, but this one wasn't as good as it could have been. True. 3 stars. After so many bad reviews, I went into this not expecting much, but yet again I found myself enjoying it. A pretty good story, but the plot is same old stuff. The effects were okay, but the ending was very lackluster. Not greatly acted, and a few plot holes don't help things, but its runtime is short and it's an easy watch, but nothing memorable. Yeah, I think that runtime is a big part of why it has problems. If it had had a longer runtime, it could have been shored up in a lot of fascinating ways. 3 stars. There were some good ideas and some decent action, but sometimes the story drags and goes nowhere. The visual effects are sometimes a little dated, but that doesn't mean I didn't hate the movie. The performances were fine. Hayden Christensen did a lot better of a job than he did with the Star Wars prequels. It's like Hancock meets Bourne Identity. I'll agree with some of that. I think they're referencing the hate for Hayden Christensen too. Actually, I don't think he did a better job than he did from an acting point of view in the prequels. I think George Lucas is why he performed the way he did in the prequels. You need to put more of that on George Lucas. I'm not saying he was perfect. I'm just saying I've seen the documentary on the making of the prequels, and George Lucas, when he wasn't sitting in his chair watching screens of, CGI, he was actually up next to the actors, telling them specifically how they should react to things and what they should say. So, no, it's not just Hayden Christensen. Half a star. Wow, where to begin? Starring Hayden Christensen as I'm Out. Okay, maybe I'll give it a try. Also featuring a cameo by Kristen Stewart. No. Um, well, maybe, but if she was in it, she wasn't the problem. I forgot she was there. If she was there, yeah, they're saying again Hayden Christensen, and then they were willing to write this movie off. Not fair at all. 5 stars. I guess to get more, I will have to read the book. Yeah, most likely. Half a star. So bad that it's still bad. 4 stars. Entertainment value. It was fun, original, and fantastic. 2.5 stars. Got potential, but did not live up to it. 1.5 stars. Poor Hayden Christensen. He really did have the final destination of acting careers. Yeah, sort of, but he's still kind of young, so we'll see. 3 stars. Trashy teen movie, but interesting enough if you suspend disbelief. I'll agree with that. 2.5 stars. Some interesting observations contemplating instantaneous presence anywhere at will. That's one way to say it. The premise was great. It's just the execution. 4.5 stars. I don't understand the hate. It was a good premise and a fun action movie. Not a big Hayden Christensen fan, but a 16% rating and 44% liked seems awfully low. There are far too many bad movies out there. I'd say this movie is better than the latest Star Wars. I'll agree with you on that, but not to 4.5 stars. If you want to make an unfair comparison between this and The Last Jedi, again, let's not say Last Jedi. This is a review from 2015, so let's say they're reviewing this to The Force Awakens. Yeah, I still find the premise of this far more exciting than what we got in Force Awakens. Force Awakens was simply a retread, soft reboot of the original Star Wars. So yeah, this movie had way more potential than The Force Awakens. 2.5 stars. Barely remember it, but it clearly wasn't as good as the movie I keep mistaking for this one. 1.5 stars. Lacking the fresh narrative, charismatic performers, and visual thrills to become halfway decent, Jumper is a surprisingly flat sci-fi that's just as dull as the title. Okay, I'm probably going to leave it there. I thought we would get even a lot more Hayden Christensen hate. Maybe there are pages of that going further back, but I'll say still I stick with that as being the number one problem with the audience score. The movie has flaws, a disappointing ending, but I think that if you were to replace somebody else had played Hayden Christensen's character, your audience score would probably be a respectable 60% with, a popcorn bucket that was standing upright. Yes, the critic score would probably still be rotten. It'd probably still be about 20%. But anyway, I feel that's the best case I can make for Jumper at this time. So here's hoping for a sequel, kind of, maybe, someday. Until the next Rotten Reviews, I'm out of here.